And now, it's time for the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. Listen in as Snowden interviews cannabis industry pioneers, marijuana experts, policymakers, medical practitioners, patients, and other amazing individuals with compelling stories to share. It all happens right now. Here's the Cannabis Reporter, Snowden Bishop.
Hi, and welcome back to the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. I'm Snowden Bishop, and I'm happy you could join us today. Before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to Sunstate Technologies and ICS Solutions, our newest partners supporting our mission to bring you awareness about cannabis. We are grateful and thank them and hope that you'll check out their banners next time you visit us online at thecannabisreporter.com. As you can imagine, the cannabis industry has been buzzing with anticipation ever since more than 80 years of hemp prohibition came to an end with the passage of the Farm Bill last month. Since then, we've been flooded with press releases from CBD companies applauding lawmakers and announcing plans to ramp up production of new CBD products to meet national demand. That wouldn't be so unusual except for the fact that the Farm Bill didn't actually legalize CBD. It did, however, move appropriations allocated for enforcing CBD regulation away from the DEA and turning that authority over to the FDA instead. And if you thought that the DEA had far better things to do than prosecute mothers who give CBD to sick children, this may have sounded like really good news. But in light of recent events, the measure may have made matters worse for the CBD industry, and here's why. See, under protection of the 2004 ruling in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, CBD was legally sold in all 50 states for more than a decade without any DEA interference. So after the Federal Registry announced that CBD was assigned its own Schedule I code for tracking purposes 2 years ago, the DEA has kept its distance. But the FDA started questioning the legality of selling food infused with controlled substances. Shortly after California's adult use regulation became law, the FDA warned the state's health department that allowing the sale of CBD-infused edibles violated federal law because the state's measure failed to name CBD as an exempted substance. So in response, California banned edibles infused with hemp CBD. While that shot across the bow in California is likely a harbinger of things to come, the warnings have fallen on deaf ears like the boy who cried wolf. Despite the ban, the CBD industry is still thriving and growing everywhere. So if you're wondering how FDA oversight might make matters worse, well, like I said, the FDA now has authority to make and enforce CBD policy. In no uncertain terms, its announcement last week put the entire industry on notice that the agency intends to enforce CBD policy according to the Controlled Substances Act. That means each new CBD product will be required to comply with the FDA's rigorous application process and undergo lengthy agency-approved series of clinical human trials before they will even consider approving them. Now, I'm not saying that CBD products shouldn't have to comply with FDA guidelines. Of course they should, just like every other nutritional supplements are required to do. But given the body of evidence that CBD is harmless, subjecting it to the same level of enforcement and scrutiny as lethal drugs like fentanyl would seem like a colossal waste of time and money. The cost alone could put otherwise thriving cannabis startups out of business and potentially sabotage advancement of an industry that could generate billions of dollars in tax revenues and solve some perplexing public health problems. The irony here is the rigor at which the FDA is gunning for a holistic, non-psychoactive plant molecule that has never killed anyone. It has zero potential for abuse and is so necessary for human health that maternal mammary glands naturally produce it in breast milk for babies. The discovery of the endocannabinoid system and its importance to other major systems in the human body has prompted extensive research to ascertain ways in which cannabinoids, terpenes, and other therapeutic constituents of the cannabis plant interact with those vitally important systems. Meanwhile, some of the world's most dangerous drugs are fast-tracked for approval with minimal clinical study and no higher than 30% efficacy rate required. In fact, On average, more than 30% of those new drugs approved on a fast track by the FDA are recalled due to adverse side effects or high mortality rates. The bar has continually been lowered for these risky products where major pharmaceuticals are concerned. In fact, the standards to which FDA measures the safety and efficacy of legal pharmaceuticals pale by comparison to the standards to which the cannabis industry holds itself. Now, that's not to say there aren't some bad actors cutting corners for a profit, but as a whole, the cannabis industry is proving itself to be one of the most socially responsible, conscientious, and innovative self-regulating industries of all time. Having endured more excessive scrutiny than most emerging industries, cannabis innovators have had to jump through hoops to prove themselves. This becomes more evident in the scientific community that informs the medical practitioners in the absence of information about cannabis in the U.S. pharmacopoeia. And scientists have developed modern diagnostic techniques to help medical practitioners use DNA markers and genome mapping to more efficiently diagnose patients based on genetic markers, metabolic rate, molecular deficiencies, and other factors that can only be determined with DNA analysis. These data can then be used to drill down on the best formulas not only to treat a patient's specific medical condition, but also to prevent disease and support immune function, neurological development, and overall homeostasis for optimal health. And that leads me to today's topic, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest. Len May is a pioneer with more than 25 years in the medical cannabis industry. He's worked with Cannabis Action Network, the California Cannabis Association, and some of the industry's most iconic brands before becoming CEO of EndoCanna Health. As a certified specialist in medicinal genomics with a master's in medical cannabis and certification as endocannabinoid formulation specialist from the Institute for the Advancement of Integrative Medicine, he has an in-depth knowledge of genomics, cannabinoids, and terpenes and their interaction with the endocannabinoid system. He's also an accomplished public speaker, having presented on the workings of the endocannabinoid system and how genetic expression plays a role in the human experience. So, Len, I am really excited to get into this conversation with you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, you're not a physician and you're not technically a scientist, but you do have a master's degree.
Yeah, they call me the sciencey guy, so I'll take that.
And I noticed also that you have some advocacy work under your belt. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I used to be the president of the Cannabis Action Network. So one of the reasons why I even got into the cannabis space, I guess, is as a kid, I was diagnosed with ADD and I was put on all kinds of prescription medication. And super grateful for the discovered cannabis is really my go-to medicine. And I never really realized as a kid, as a teenager, that it's also medicine for other people. I just thought, people do it recreationally, but it's actually helping me. And until I met a group of people that were part of the Cannabis Action Network, and I asked them what they're doing, and they said, we're fighting for legalization. I said, how? I said, registering people to vote. So I became the president of the Cannabis Action Network and try to really do something about it. By the first time I held a rally I'm from Philadelphia originally, at Independence Hall in Philadelphia in 1993, 1994. My keynote speaker was this lady by the name of Elvie Musica. And Elvie is one of the first people medically prescribed cannabis under a federal program that was an IND program at that time. And she spoke. She opened up her jar with a big USDA label on it of cannabis that's cultivated in Mississippi under the guidance of the federal government. And she lit up and consumed right in front of federal rangers and federal land where the Declaration of Independence is, where the Constitution is, all written on hemp paper, by the way. And then the next day, everybody sort of, they stayed in my house. It was a loud crash. And realized that Elvie walked into a sculpture that I had in my house and broke into little pieces. And she was very apologetic, but I realized she had degenerative glaucoma and she was legally blind until she medicated in front of me and she could see again. So that sort of started my journey to say, okay, it's not just medicine for me, it's medicine for other people as well. And how do I how do I get this medicine to more people? So that became my journey. And when I moved to Los Angeles and got into the dispensary business, I started doing the same thing. But the confusion that I was experiencing was that, number one, when we find something that works for a person and they go and get it in another dispensary, sometimes it doesn't work. Well, the combination was the plant genetics weren't really matching everywhere. And then I didn't really realize the human DNA part at all. So when I was working with a company name of Medicinal Genomics, I wanted to work with the first person to genetically sequence cannabis, and his name was Kevin McKernan. And under Kevin, my job was to go around, extract DNA from different plants, cannabis plants around the country, purify the DNA, and send it over into a sequencer in Boston so we can start genetically creating a library of different chemovars and cultivars. So now we could genetically see how the plants align. So that was one piece of the puzzle. But trying to merge that with somebody's personal experience, that sort of led me into the human DNA side as well.
That's fascinating. And, I don't think a lot of people are really aware of the glaucoma program because by law and federal government, there's absolutely zero medical use of cannabis, according to the way it's scheduled in the CSA. So with the glaucoma program, that actually started, I think, back in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So under President Bush, they ended that program, the first President Bush, but it was started in, you're right, officially it got underway in 1976, was the first person that got prescribed, not only for glaucoma, he was a cancer patient. He fought the government and got medically prescribed cannabis under that program. And then at its height, they had 16 patients that were receiving cannabis from the federal government under the guidance of, the USDA and FDA.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So when you started collecting the DNA samples from the plant strains, is that how you would refer to them?
Well,
it's such a common term.
It is a common term, but Dr. Ethan Russo told me one time, he goes, strains refer to viruses. So we call cannabis strains, but that really, in the medical definition, that's really a virus. What we want to call something that is plant-based medicine that's derived from plant is either a chemovar or a cultivar. So, but we can call it whatever you want to call it. It's fine.
Were you gathering them from different states, and how are you able to handle that, getting it back into one facility? Because obviously a facility would be in one state. Did you have to have special license to do that?
No, because you don't need you can transfer cannabinoids, specifically THC or any of the scheduled substances, but you can transfer genetic material. So when I was collecting DNA, one of the things I had to do was purify that DNA. So what that means is remove all the cannabinoid, all the terpene profiles, just have enough genetic material where I can send it out without any of the metabolizers that will be picked up on from THC or CBD or anything else. So it wasn't anything that would create a psychotropic effect, and it was completely legal. It's completely legal to send DNA back and forth over through the mail.
Because that seems to be, such a problem. And then you also mentioned the University of Mississippi, which still to this day is the only officially approved facility for growing the plant substances that are being tested through these clinical trials, which I find really astonishing considering that it's not really the best quality of what it was.
Yeah, and no, you're absolutely right. If you talk to Dr. Sue Sisley, who's running the clinical trial,
and I have,
yeah, right, using that. So I'm sure it's full of mold. They had to sign off agreements that they're responsible for remediating that. So the government already knows that they're growing, contaminated cannabis products, and they're making it if you're going to get a DA, DOJ license to do a trial, you are assuming all accountability for that source material, which is kind of ironic, because if the government's supposed to be cultivating the highest quality source material so we can run